This particular program is on the 4 disciplines of execution based upon the book that was common to all of you, and it is 4DX Revisited. I am delighted to have as our 4 presenters, led by Bo Drake, who is the Vice President for Economic and Workforce Development at Chattanooga State University, and for Michael Carter, who's the Assistant Vice President for Advancement Services with the University of Tennessee Foundation, and Kelly Cheney, and I'm looking around the screens to the folks. Kelly is the President of the Tennessee College of Applied Technology in Knoxville, and Michael Hoff, the Assistant Vice President and the Chief Planning Officer for East Tennessee State University. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bo. Bo.
Yes. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see some of my fellow classmates on here as well, and look forward to getting to know the rest of you through what apparently is going to be a series of these moving forward. I do want to thank Bob for organizing us. As you know, he is very much the mastermind of these events. And I'm looking for my slides. Here we go. All right, so we're going to spend the next hour talking through 4DX and how some of us have implemented it in our colleges and universities and departments. I do have one ground rule for the group. And if you were like my class, this should be an easy ground rule. Questions, comments, and discussions are encouraged and welcome at any time throughout this. I think it'll really enhance the value of what we all get from this shared experience. Again, and I didn't send this to Bob beforehand, but he got everybody in the exact right order because that's the kind of guy he is. So again, this is everyone presenting today. I thought it would be nice to have a refresher. I've got to move you all over a little bit. Just on the 4 disciplines themselves. Of course, focus, leverage, engagement, and accountability. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to pause here for a minute before I go on to the next slide, because I'm going to show you some of the results that we've had in my division in implementing the 4 disciplines of execution. So it's almost 3 years ago to the day that I moved to Tennessee from Indiana. And shortly after arriving here, I was still in fairly frequent conversation with my colleagues in Indiana. And they told me that in the community college system, they were rolling out the 4 disciplines of execution. I immediately hopped on Amazon and purchased the book because I thought if it's good for them, it might be good for me. And I spent, you all have read the book, the next hour and a half devouring it. I mean, it's a quick read, right? And I was very motivated and excited and got copies of it for my team and had them read it. And then we spent time talking about it and thinking about how we might implement it in our division. And probably one of the neatest things, one of the most fortunate things that occurred during that process was I discovered this division, this team that I had inherited, did not know how our division was measured. They didn't know. So it was kind of like playing a game, as they refer to in the book, without a scoreboard or really knowing what the purpose was. So we were very quickly able to identify our 2 wildly important goals. The first one being our top line revenue, and the second one being the number of workforce training hours that we conduct in a given year. And just simply identifying those 2 goals had an amazing impact and an almost immediate impact on our performance. And I want to show you how that translates into real numbers. So in 2016, that was prior to my arrival, or yes. So if you go to 15-16, we generated 50,000 workforce training hours. And in 16-17, it was almost 52,000. And I would like to take credit for this, and it's going to sound like I am, but you all know that that is not the truth. Once we got the team focused on our wildly important goals, we immediately saw a 16% jump in our year-to-year performance. And as Lauren knows from a THEC perspective, this is part of our college funding performance or performance funding metric. So this has a financial impact on the college itself. The next year, we found it a little more challenging to drive the numbers further north. But during that 18-19 year, because we were focused on those wildly important goals, we were able to step back and start reviewing strategies that we could deploy to help drive those numbers further north. You know, those leading indicators that we could actually have an impact on. And then this last year in 2019, 2020, we saw a 26% growth. Now I want to pause there for a minute because it turns out that this entire work ended up being somewhat fortuitous, because you've noticed I've only put up one of our wildly important goals on here, and I didn't share our top line revenue, because it was a very disappointing 2019-2020 year. As you all know, we happened to have a pandemic in the middle of that year that had a significant impact on us. But because of the work that we had done, we were able to have a very shiny spot and something incredibly positive that we could talk about as an outcome for our work. Cumulative over these years, this is a roughly 54% increase in performance, which I attribute 100% of that to our focus on those wildly important goals. And I'll pause there for a minute just to solicit any questions that any of you might have, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk to you about his experiences. Michael, all yours, and just say next slide or throw something at the screen and I'll change it for you.
All right, thank you, Bo. Next slide. So thank you, Bo. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad to be a part of this discussion. I oversee central operations for the UT Foundation, which comprises of 6 departments focusing on IT, prospect development, online engagement, user services, business intelligence, and alumni and donor records. We support the 4 UT campuses and the UT Institute of Ag with their fundraising, engagement, and advocacy needs. We at times get multiple projects and ad hoc requests coming at us from all directions. It is a good problem to have because it keeps us busy, but at times it can get overwhelming because everyone needs their requests completed now. Their project is the priority and the most important. You know, I can relate to all the books that we discussed in the ELE program, but 4DX really spoke to me because after reading just a couple of pages, it mentioned the word whirlwind, and that just really grabbed me. It said, yes, this book is talking about our operation, and it actually had a solution. And I was just very excited. After about, you know, Bo said he took about an hour and a half to read it. After 30 minutes, I didn't even finish reading the book. After 30 minutes of reading, I ordered 6 copies, one for each of my directors, and I mailed it to them via Amazon. And I remember a couple of them called me when they received it. I didn't tell them it was coming, and asked me, what is this for? And I told them it's the answer to our whirlwind. It's going to keep us focused on the goal, and also how to handle, you know, distractions. As the excitement spread, which was amazing, I didn't realize other employees within within advancement services actually ordered the 40X book, because our the team, the leadership team, we just started talking about it. And of the 34 employees, 20 ordered the book. And we started to plan on implementing 40X for FY21. So we just got started. It's a light, I would call it 40X light, but still it's been very effective. Next slide. So as a team, everyone was involved in ideas for our WIGs, okay, for a widely important goal. We're looking for goals that would be impactful to our operation, measurable, and we had 80% control over. We had several suggestions, but we all agreed on 2 WIGs: reduce gift and pledge entry errors by 20%. Last year, we posted 197,000 transactions, the highest number ever, with only, and I say only, 345 errors, which is 0.001%, the lowest percentage ever. But with all that success, we heard more about the 345 errors, and to be honest, rightfully so. As a donor, you want to be confident that your donation was deposited to the correct fund. And in addition, our fundraisers and our senior leaderships are put in an awkward position if we have a donor calling them to say, hey, what's going on? I got my receipt and it went to the College of Business instead of the Institute of Agriculture. So, that's not fair to the staff. So reducing the gift and pledge entry errors would be a big win for everyone, especially our department. Next slide, Bo. So we have our WIGs. Now we're talking about lead measures. A good lead measure has 2 basic characteristics. It's predictive of achieving the goal, and it can be influenced by team members. So with that charge, each team member set out to identify several processes that would positively impact our WIGs. Some of them listed here are completed and some are ongoing, and it has made an enormous impact to our WIGs. And you'll see the results in a little bit. Next slide, Bo. So the scoreboard. Folks, the scoreboard is very important. The scoreboard has a very positive effect on the team. It's very simple. Everyone has access to the scoreboard, so it's very transparent to see how the team is progressing, and everybody individually. Being transparent allowed for staff members challenging each other. We identified staff members who needed additional training. We made several adjustments to our workflows for efficiency, and team supporting each other. We are working as one. No one gets upset if an error is made. The focus is how to prevent, if an error happens, how to prevent it from happening again. So next slide, Bo. The last lead measure is accountability. We have weekly WIG meetings, and they're very, very productive. We started out meeting for 30 minutes every week, and now it's about 15 to 20 minutes. And we review weekly individual commitments from the previous week. We set individual commitments for the current week. We review the scoreboards to see the progress. And if any errors has happened, we discuss the errors and we make the adjustments. So next slide, Bo, we're going to look at the results. So this is just very amazing for us. We, so far it's been a tremendous success. We implemented the 40X program in August. And if you can see that third column there, number of errors. In August we had, in July, we had 43 errors. In August, it dropped significantly, okay? And in September, we had 6. We have never had 6 errors before. I mean, we were just so pumped, and we said, okay, we're going to go lower. And so far this month in October, we have had 4 errors. And we hope to have 4 errors to break the previous month. And if we don't, it's fine, but we have reduced it significantly. So, 4DX has made an enormous difference. That is changing our culture. We're very focused. It has helped us to manage our whirlwind. The whirlwind is not going away. It's always going to be there. But 4DX helps us to focus on a goal that is impactful to our operations and our operational goals, organizational goals, I'm sorry. It's not like we didn't know what to do. It's just that we didn't focus on what needed to be done. And again, I sing the praises. We already have ideas about how we want to do the next week for the next fiscal year. And all the books in Ely have been fantastic, but I would recommend this one in a heartbeat. And I think, Bo, we're going to pass it over to Kelly, unless there are any questions.
Hey, Michael, how many employees do you have in your department or division that you trained on this program?
So we have 34 employees. And although this particular WIG is mainly impacted our alumni and donor records department, everybody was involved. And the training, everybody bought the book, or the majority of staff bought the book, and they read it. So we got buy-in already, because it's like we all know what we needed to do. We just couldn't focus on it because we had a lot of distractions. So it was amazing that the collaboration and the input and feedback, and it wasn't from just the leadership team, but just everybody. They made it fun. The first meeting, we had several folks, when we talked about wigs, we had several folks, they put wigs on because they say, hey, we're here talking about wigs. So they had wigs on, and it's especially during the COVID and working remotely, this brought some energy back to the team. So we're pretty pumped, and we're excited about the success. And I hope Bob would invite us back, and we can show you some of the results at the end of the fiscal year. I hope we have a couple months where there are 0 errors. And the individuals that would contact us about particular errors, the staff members, we don't get a lot of those phone calls anymore. And it's refreshing and rewarding. It's a big win for the staff. It's a big win for the organization. It's a big win for our department. So I can't talk enough about 4DX.
So Michael, as a follow-up, how long did you give your staff to read the book? And then how long was your training once the book had been read?
So it's funny. I think I bought the book back in June, and it's just the thing is, it was just there wasn't any official training. Everybody just read the book so they could understand the terminology, and it was a train as you go. So for example, when we tried to set the WIG goal, we were like, okay, what do we do? We can't just pick a number. And so we said, okay, let's look at the past performances for the past couple of years. And, we average our error rate, it decreased, approximately 5 to 10% every year. So we all decided that, okay, we're going to do 20%, because we didn't know how this is going to turn out. And it's a whole lot better. We're going to still keep 20%, but I think we're going to beat that and then some. We have some, December is usually busy for us. We have what's called a big orange give that's usually busy for us. So we're going to see, but I'm pretty confident in the team that we're going to make our goal. So it took about a month, but we jumped in feet first and we were ready to go. And we started out small, we just selected the error rate for our gifts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey everybody, how are you today? So Bob has mentioned to me that to talk about where we are in the 4DX and how we're getting our institution moving along in that. And we are in the very, very beginning stages. Like Michael, I bought the book for my entire staff back in June. They're pretty convinced they have a crazy president, and that's okay. But what we were experiencing and continue to experience as we go through this process is there was a tremendous whirlwind affecting our daily efficiency and how we manage students and getting students through the pipeline from inquiry to enrollment. Somehow we were losing people, yet we had a tremendous wait list, but yet we may have empty seats. So that was a bit of a concern. And I will tell you, when I went through the program and read 4DX the first time, I'm like, hallelujah, this is my answer. So our staff now has the books, and we're going to be working with Bo over the next month or so to get a training set up formally for our student services team, our financial aid department, our business office, and then we plan to move faculty into that same 4DX training in the spring. Faculty have a lot on their plate right now, so we're trying to be respectful of that, but we're going to do it in small stages. So my administrative staff have had the book longer than anyone else, and that's our vice president, our chief business officer, those types of folks. So here's what we are doing. The goal for us is to stop the whirlwind, and how we're going to do that. We feel like 4DX is a fantastic model, that there is no need to try to recreate something else. So Michael, I am hoping like heck we are where you are in the process in a few months. So I applaud you for that. But one of the things that struck me funny, but not out of the ordinary, and I think it's not out of the ordinary for anyone, I was new to Tennessee and new to this college, of course. And the one thing I kept hearing when we were talking about how do we streamline our processes, how do we make this better, not only for the student, but for the employees, how do we get better and get smarter and work a lot less harder, but a lot smarter. So just the phrase that's on the screen, I heard it over and over and over. We've always done it this way, Kelly. You're crazy. We've always done it this way. So we have lots of laughs and lots of chuckles, but I will tell you this, taking the book and giving it to the staff months ahead of time and talking about my experiences in the leadership program, and I did share some of the presentations with them, the PowerPoints with our staff. We talked about goals. We talked about alignment. We talked about why do we need to do this? And our wildly important goal right now is to fill every seat. I'm sure in higher education across the country, there are empty seats everywhere, and we need to address that, but we need to be better at it. So we started working without a formalized model of 4DX, we had our team come up with what they felt like was the wildly important goal for student services. And they talked about a lot of things. There was a huge whirlwind. There were people getting lost in the shuffle day to day. This department was thinking that department took care of that, or somebody else just does that and we connect it together later. We realized we got a big problem in how the units relate to each other, okay? So we talked about a wildly important goal informally, what that might look like. The wildly important goal was to fill every seat for the fall. With the pipeline report, that we have now converted to a scorecard. Now, Bo, we'll be ready for you to formalize all this for us when you get here. So just bear with me. But the cool thing about that and the book is making others aware of their own behavior and how that affects the wildly important goal. Like the business office didn't realize an issue in student services, or student services didn't realize, oh, the business office needs this by such and such date of the month, or it's going to hold up everything in financial aid processing and other things. So it was able to connect some of those things, and we've mapped it out very informally. We'll be ready for the training really soon. So that's where we are. We are in the very beginning stages because we have got to put a stop to this whirlwind. And that's where we truly are. So that's how we got to this point. A lot of alignment and a lot of accountability, and now we're ready to move forward. So Bo, there we go.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Kelly. Any questions before we move on, or similar experiences that somebody wants to share?
Well, I've got a question. This is David Butler. In two of your examples, y'all already had a momentum moving forward of efficiency, a 4% growth, or errors going down, et cetera. Are there any examples of where the trend is negative? In other words, things are slipping in an organization and 4DX can come in and stop the bleed and then turn that around rather than taking a positive movement and just accentuating it?
Well, David, I'm trying to take that as a compliment, number one, for the growth that we've had. I can only speak from, what I would anticipate being a positive response to your question. I think the real key to the success of this, whether it's an organization that's struggling or one that's kind of performing on a mediocre basis, is that, to Kelly's point, it does create some individual exposure as to where your gaps are. Once you, and Michael shared this as well, with the need to retrain some people or additional training. But I think it does help identify where those individual performance gaps are, so you can determine where the leak is and then implement strategies to stop that leak. And then I do think there is kind of a wave or a shift among the team. At least it's been my experience that that old saying that success begets success. Once people start to see the positive momentum, they want to be a part of it, and it's really impactful. And if any of you on the call have been at this longer than I have, I would love to hear it, because one of the challenges, and I was sharing this with Michael the other day, is maintaining momentum. And we've got a question for you all at the end of this presentation that I hope you'll have a great answer to. But maintaining momentum, I think, is more difficult than fixing a broken team or accelerating growth. I don't know if that answers your question, David, but I tried.
It's more like, do you have to have precursors in place to be able to implement it? Because it sounds like the example so far, everyone was eager, enthusiastic. If you have a dysfunctional organization that may be going south, do you have to do something before you have the ability to introduce this to get buy-in?
I think it's about the ability to impact the outcome. So I think part of what you're seeing, David, is because it's easier to think you can impact an outcome that is starting to move in the right direction, and so that momentum is there. But like at ETSU, we were seeing a 2 to 3% drop in our retention rate, and we were about to hit the lowest graduation rate we'd ever hit. And we put together a student success team and had them focus on a scorecard around student success. And we identified capacity as being the primary issue. We're not the only one who's done this. I mean, this is a theme right now in higher education, that you hire more advisors and you decrease that load, and you're going to see a higher outcome for high need students. But I do think the speed at which we did it, I mean, we went from potentially hitting a 38% graduation rate to instead hitting a 50% graduation rate because we did that. And we didn't do it on enrollment, which I'll get to in my presentation, although it was wrapped up in the same topic. And that's because people thought they could impact students who were already here, but they didn't have that same belief about students who weren't here yet. And I think that was the differentiating characteristic. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, thank you for both of y'all.
Michael, I say keep going.
Yeah, keep going, Michael.
So go to the next slide, if you would. And I'm going to talk about a scoreboard. And this is what I do. I mean, it's what I've always done. I've done strategic plans at Cincinnati State and at ETSU. And both times the reason I got to do them, or I got to be involved in leading that process, is because I was the data guy who could put together scoreboards. I'm still not sure I do it right. And we'll get to that at the end. But it needs to be simple, and everybody needs to be able to see it. The lead and lag measures are really important, and it's important to know that, and I'll touch on that at the end. And then you can tell at a glance if you're winning. I'm not sure that our scoreboard is that, the one I'm going to show you, but I do think that for people who judge us on our wins and losses, they'll be able to see that section for their area quickly. If you would go to the next one. The reason I want to talk about key performance indicators is because in 4DX, it's a system, and you've heard people talk about buying books for everybody. But at ETSU, I don't know that we had the culture where we had enough buy-in with one another. And I'll talk about that as we go. But the thing that was true is that people were interested in KPIs. And the big thing about KPIs is you can use data as a weapon or a tool. And 4DX tries to get you to use data as a tool and not a weapon. It's not a punishment characteristic. Too often people create dashboards with the intent that they're going to fire somebody, they're going to hold somebody accountable. And that's the other thing about the cycle of accountability. The cycle of accountability isn't intended to use a scoreboard so that you can hold someone accountable as an exit strategy. It's to identify areas where there are problems and to remove barriers. It's a mindset. And that's really why 4DX as a system is so good. But I think the one thing you can do, even if you can't get that mindset across your organization, is you can create the right scoreboard. And it does involve the session around WIGs and all those things. And that's why you have to make sure they're aligned with outcomes. But the other thing is the regular tracking cycle. Even people who don't measure themselves or understand the measurements, if you start that cycle, you create the cadence, right? Twice a year, we update the board. And we had this scoreboard before we started presenting it to the Board of Trustees, and nobody paid attention to it. Then all of a sudden, after we had 2 board meetings, people started sending me questions. Hey, why does this number look the way it does? That's not right. And then come to find out, yeah, it was. You just thought you were doing better than you were. Let's talk about why you're not. And those things happen. And so I think one thing I think it's probably in here a little bit, but I want to state it clearly. The level at which you present your scoreboard determines how much people pay attention to it. And for a university or a system, making sure it's part of your board agenda, make sure that people pay attention to it. If you would go to the next slide. The other thing is to look around and see what other people like you are measuring. There's a great quote from the guy that started the National Community College Benchmarking Project. And people asked him, they said, why did you do this? At this community college in Iowa. And he said, well, our president was going around telling everybody we were in the top 10% and in employment outcomes for our students. And we were telling everybody we're top 10%, and our employment rate was 95.8%. And he goes, so I started looking around and I said, is that true? And he goes, come to find out, the median was 98%. He goes, we weren't even in the top half, but because the number we had was so high, we just automatically started saying top 10% and it stuck. And he goes, so I wanted to create a scoreboard for people that let them know that they were measuring the right things the right way. And so you can see some of the things that are up here. I love the advancement example that you have, Michael, because one of the examples on our scoreboard where I'll talk about something that wasn't going right and they focused on the wildly important goal and they got there. One of them we're still struggling with, but advancement is one of the best areas, that and enrollment, because at the end of the period, you can do the plus minus, you know who's up and who's down. Go ahead and go to the next slide, if you would, Bo. Thank you. Nope, we're stuck. Well, this is where we're going to live now. This is our world.
Yeah, hang on.
Nobody can get out.
There we go.
The other thing is who you measure yourself against. So sometimes internally, it's enough to be internal about what you're doing. But oftentimes when you're talking about broad organizational goals, you need to have some context in order to understand whether or not the effort you put in might not have hit the metric you wanted to, but you still might have outperformed the market. And I think that's a really important concept, in particular during COVID, because everybody had some enrollment loss or some enrollment gain in certain areas, but it doesn't mean that you didn't succeed. Our enrollment team saw an enrollment decrease in undergraduate enrollment. They did. But number one, it wasn't as much as the trajectory projected. And two, it was a lot better than some. And I think that's a really important thing, because you've got to be able to recognize when hard work doesn't meet the goal because they weren't focused in the right direction or because the goal was impossible. And you've got to be able to acknowledge that so you don't burn people out, and you've got to congratulate them anyway. And that having the right peer group, I think, does that. If you would, Bo, go ahead and go to the next one. This is what our scorecard looks like. It actually looks different now. I used the original one I put together, but it's relatively easy to see that the red arrows are probably the bad arrows. But the other thing I wanted you to see was that for any particular player, so in the book in 40X, they talk about a player, it needs to be a player's dashboard. Any particular player at the institution can look right to their section. So stewardship of place, that's going to be mainly about clinics and then total funds giving. The total funds giving is the number where we just knocked it out of the park. When we set the strategic plan in 2016, we set a plan to get to 25 million because we were hanging around like 11. And then all of a sudden in 2017, we were up in like 21. And then you can see by 2018, we hit 29. So we're going to have to revisit that this year. But that's because they really came in and did this kind of a system, and they did do a system of it. But the other things are the graduation and retention rate. Like I mentioned, we were going to hit 38% on the graduation rate, and we went to 44, and now we're at 50. We hit 73 in 2018. This year, we're at 78% on retention. But you see over on the left-hand side, university enrollment. Our big goal, our wildly important goal was 18,000 students. I would hope that all of you have seen somebody talk about the pending demographic cliff that's going to hit higher education in the next few years. And we were so distracted by that we said head count was the goal. And that was flawed. Bo, if you would, go ahead and take us to the final slide here. What we noticed was what was important wasn't how many students we had. There's a thing that's been bothering me for a long time, and this just came up. I mean, the chief of staff, the president, and I, for the past 3 weeks, we're about to launch a new planning initiative, and we've been trying to come up with what's our wildly important goal. What's going to be the thing that makes this plan different than all the other plans, makes us different than all the other institutions. And our president is from a system. He was at THAC, and then he was at West Virginia. And so he's familiar with this, but I told him, I said, I had this conversation with somebody the other day about the funding formula. And I said, the thing that still angers me is that we expect partnership among institutions, but nowhere on the university or the community college funding is it a requirement that we increase college going. How is the college going rate not the primary thing that determines our funding? We get enrollment, we have these things, but if you want partnership between primary, secondary education through college and beyond, you've got to create a metric that we all have to meet. And he goes, you know what? And then the chief of staff said the same thing. And so now our focus is on the pipeline. What can we do to make sure more ninth graders get through high school? What can we do to make sure more high school students go to college? Any college in our region, not just ETSU. Go to Milligan, go to Northeast. Partnership among institutions. And then what can we do to make sure more of them graduate? Because we've seen increases with the state focus on primary and secondary education and the number of ninth graders that are going to graduate high school. But that final number, the percent graduating college, is only 27. So only 27 out of 100 students in Tennessee are going to graduate college. That's not enough, and that's not the drive to 55. So this was something we could do. We've got a lot going on with economic development. I get into economic development with this. There's a lot. We have way too many components on that dashboard. And you can tell from the dashboard, there's way too many arrows. And you can look at any one arrow and say, okay, that's my arrow. That's good enough. We've got to get that down. By looking at the pipeline data, that's it. That's all we got to worry about. Because if I get enough of that pipeline moving, I'm going to have to hire more faculty. I'm going to have to train more. I'm going to have more programs. All these things align. We update the board twice a year. I told you about that. We also emphasize strategy alignment. We're getting them more involved in the strategic discussion. For the LGIs as a group, the one thing that we all got to leverage better is that board. All vice presidents. So this is the other thing we started in March. We started a conversation about how we align executive evaluations with the strategic plan. James Retruba told me after one of our sessions that when he got to NKU, the thing that he did is he made 50% of their evaluation on what they did for their own unit and 50% of their evaluation on what their unit did for others around the campus. I think when we talk about that wildly important goal, that's part of what it's designed to do, is to create and break down, or to break down those silos that we artificially create. And then, like I said, well, it's better, I think, to use 40X as a system. I hope what you take away from my part of the presentation is that you can pick out a component of this and you can get started. So I don't cook. I never cook. And I've had to learn recently because I'm trying to be a better person and help out my family more. But I recently made burgers the other night. And I know this is ridiculous that I've never grilled, but I was so afraid of trying to cook so much. I was so afraid of it that I didn't know how to do the vegetable. I didn't know how to do this, that I didn't start. And so once I started with that burger, the next thing I knew, the rest of it just fell together. And that's what I think this is. And Bob, I saw that you put in there, what gets measured gets done. I don't know if anybody recognizes any of this, but I actually gave this presentation, a piece of it, to the board development for the trustees in Memphis last year. And my section was called What Gets Measured Gets Done. And so that's why this spoke to me when you all asked me to present. I hope you've learned a little something, and I'll take questions.
Mike, you're always great, and I know it would be. So, you know, one of the things, and I welcome other discussion as well, but one of the things that Michael and I were talking about that is a little bit of a struggle in all of this is we can figure out how to implement the system. We can figure out what the wildly important goals are. We can have success, but what do you do with success? How do you incentivize your team? You know, I'm very good about giving kudos to my team and telling them thank you. But I also remind them that at the end of the year, my bonus check has the same number of zeros that their bonus check does. So, you know, we're in this system that does not inherently reward performance. So, curious what others might be doing with your teams. And I'm going to stop sharing so we can all see each other in that moment. Or if you're not doing, maybe you've heard what others are doing that we could learn from.
Bo, a couple of things that I've done within my unit at MTSU. Anytime there's a compliment that gets echoed, not down, but out from my office. So as soon as there's a pipeline of compliments to any of my staff, I make sure that gets echoed out as a positive reinforcement, and everyone else realizes there's a good job going on. The other thing is we had goals that were established. As soon as we hit those and exceeded those goals last year, we had a party off campus. Out of my pocket, wasn't foundation money or anything, but it was important enough to celebrate their success, where they would invite their partners or spouses with them, so I could thank those people with it. And then also had celebratory T-shirts that people can wear on Friday. So when they show up and wear that, they sort of feel that sense of belonging and a collective effort towards success. They seem little things, but they are pretty big things. And then having compliments from the president and the provost and other people, make sure those are conveyed to them effectively, that they are acknowledged, their efforts are being recognized, and it is making a difference. Those are things that we've done at least of the last year.
Thank you, David. Anyone else doing anything along those lines? Okay. You know, one other question that kind of comes to mind, we've certainly shared some successes that have occurred from the implementation of 40X. Do others have success stories that we can learn from? And perhaps maybe even more importantly, do you have any failures of what didn't work if you've tried this, that you'd be brave enough to bare your soul in front of the entire group about?
So this is Angela Gibson. I'm Angela Gibson. I'm with the University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture. And so we bought the book. We're going through it chapter by chapter. We're going to end in November. I think sometimes we're having a hard time. I'm trying to get them to think about the process and not what our goal should be. That, you know, we're analytical, we're getting in the weeds. We're also trying to remove the word failure and use the word experiment. So, because, you know, we can always go back and do something else. And you'll never get there if you don't have that first step. And so what if that first step, you know, you falter a little bit, you know, but it leads to learning and it leads to success.
I like that, Angela. I think that's a key point. I know we oftentimes get stuck with what if I do this and I fail? And I think you're right. I think the bigger question is, what if I don't do this and nothing changes? So that's a great point to make. Well, I don't want to unnecessarily take any of your time. I know Bob is going to have incredible words of wisdom to share with us as we wrap up here, but would love to hear from any of you if you have more to share. And I'm sure the four of us that you were gracious enough to give time to today, if you have some private questions that you want to discuss offline, I, for one, would be more than willing to take your call.
Well, I'm mindful of something that Michael Carter said that fits to Angela's point, and that is he trained as you go. And to Angie's point that you know, if you wait for perfection to get started, you're never going to get started, and that doesn't just apply to this. That applies to a whole lot of things. So Kelly, kudos to you. You know, you're jumping right in and building it as you go. And Michael did the same thing, and that proved to be very successful. In fact, would either one of you say that it relieves some of the tension associated with failure, that this kind of build as you go gives people a little more safe space?
From our perspective, Bob, I think it gave our folks a little bit of cushion and some safe space, if you will. They were concerned about failing. This was all brand new to them. Reading the book and going through it as an institution, that is something they've never done before. So they were a bit scared about it, to be honest. And that's part of the reason we want Bo and his team to come in and facilitate the actual training on it. But having a safety net for that, the other good thing is we had a couple of naysayers, just to be honest, who
just two?
Well, you know, maybe a couple of handfuls, okay? But once they saw that with the accountability of our enrollment pipeline that we're converting to a scorecard, and then once they saw what I look at from the big picture of the pipeline, knowing that it was okay, I told them, I said, this is our time to try something new and different and be brave and be smart, and let's just give it a try. And I think it'll make our world a lot easier in the end. So once they knew, it's okay. We may mess up, but it's a bigger mess if we don't try. That's kind of how we look at it.
Bob, can I just say something? You know, to challenge our process that we've implemented with the 4DX, I want to challenge everybody here to make a gift to the University of Tennessee, just to make sure, just to make sure that the process is working. You know, and you say, man, Michael, it actually worked, Michael. So I'll be looking forward to everybody's donation. We take any kind of, you know, payment that you need, even gifting kinds, but just to make sure the process is working. Okay.
That's absolutely beautiful. All in the spirit of research, right, Michael? All right, I'm going to give the four of you, we're coming close to the hour that we'd promised. I'd like each one of you to tell us what are the 1, 2 key takeaways that you want the other 30 plus people that are on this call to take from what you've said today or what you've heard someone say. And so let's do it in reverse order so that we end up with Bo, and then I'm going to let you, Bo, take us out. Okay? So, Michael Hoff, you start, and then Kelly, then Carter, and then Bo, you close us out.
When you're doing this, don't forget to get outside people to take a look as your balance of quality. I deal a lot with faculty, and when they hear graduation rates or enrollment, they often wonder if that means that they're going to have to give everybody A's. And so you need to make sure that they understand that there's an outside observer around quality, that you're not just driving a business outcome. And that would be the thing I would leave you with, is balance that quality.
That was a very good point, Michael. Quality is important. Accountability is equally important, I think. The way we interact with each other, 4DX has made us a stronger institution, even though we're just now getting started, and the relationships within, understanding how one is interdependent of the other, has been important to us. Just a key finding.
I think one takeaway is that get involvement from the entire team. You'll be surprised of the responses you get, and they want to own the goal. They want to own the process. They want to be a part of the success, and and experiments, as you say, Angela. But make sure everybody gets a chance to be a part of the solution and get them involved. I think you'll get better buy-in from that.
Bob, it was good you reversed the order, because I had every intent. I had my finger on the unmute button so that I didn't have to have somebody else say what I was gonna say, which is why I always wanted to go first. So thank you, Michael. Carter. I just want to echo your comments in that I think it's incredibly important to remember that none of us, and if you raise your hand, I would swat it down if we were in the same room, none of us like to have things done to us. We like to do things with other people. And so I think it's incredibly important that in your leadership role through this process, that you have a sense of vulnerability with your team so that they feel strong enough to have a voice in the process. And that will make your outcomes far greater than anything you ever ask them to do without them being a part of it. So that's what I would leave you with. Bob, I want to thank you for the opportunity and the bravery to put the four of us together as your lead off for one of hopefully many more sessions to come. I look forward to learning from the rest of you in those sessions. Kelly and Michael squared, thank you for working with me on pulling this together. Lauren, great to see you. You obviously do a lot of work to make these successful as well, but those are my parting thoughts, and I look forward to seeing y'all again at the next session.
Great. Well, thanks to all of you, and particularly you, Bo, for organizing this after we got it initialized. The next one is going to be